Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 46th edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast. Recorded here in central London, just off historic Abbey Road. And if you follow us on Twitter, and I'm at ugly_werewolf, you may have seen a picture of me and the Wolf Cub happening by Abbey Road Studios just yesterday, where they have the Beatles' Let It Be pictures up on the wall there. They change the wall on a regular basis because people come and paint all over it, sign their names on it. And to celebrate the anniversary of Let It Be, they've got those classic Let It Be photos out there. We had a good time taking some photos and hanging out by the studio there yesterday. I'm really excited that the studio's opening their doors to do some lectures to celebrate the 90th anniversary of Abbey Road. And that'll happen in mid-November. I'll be sure to be talking about that here on the podcast with Jackson and for all of you. Really want to thank you all for making September such a successful month for us. We had a lot of downloads. We had some great guests, including photographer Kurt Angelidis, who has photographed the Rolling Stones over almost 50 years, has gone to over 100 Stone shows over the years, and has a great book out. You can hear all about that on episode 45. Also, great shout out to our friend and colleague Neil from Def Lep Pod. He's got an incredible Def Leppard podcast, and he was a lot of fun to talk with on our episode on Hysteria. We hope to have him on again here real soon. So please check those out if you haven't heard them. This week, we are getting into a classic that if you know us, you knew we were going to have to talk about eventually. And that's Led Zeppelin IV, or the fourth album by Led Zeppelin, which was technically untitled, which was an absolute juggernaut that has classic rock riffs and standouts all over it, not to mention the epic Stairway to Heaven, which maybe sparks a little backlash in that people think it's overplayed, but it also sparked Gibson to make the incredible EDS 1275, basically double neck SG guitar for Jimmy Page, the red one that is so famous, made famous by him because he needed that double neck 12 string and 6 string to go back and forth between while playing this song. It's an amazing triumph of hard rock, but it's not just hard rock. When you get into things like Battle of Evermore, Going to California, these are not hard rock heavy songs. They may deal with some heavy stuff, but they don't have crashing, crunching guitars. Bonzo's not blowing stuff up on his drums necessarily, like he does on the other songs like Rock and Roll, like Black Dog, like When the Levee Breaks, which is an incredible statement from John Bonham. So in 1971, Led Zeppelin are kind of at the odds with critics. They're kind of at the odds with the record company. They take a little time off for touring, go out in the country with the Rolling Stones mobile studio, and they sit down and say, okay, let's knock out something special. Let's do something that they haven't seen before. It may have taken a little while, but it was worth every second. And we're going to get into all of it right here. Now, as usual, we want you to check us out. All past episodes you can find at www.uglyamericanwerewolf.libsyn.com. Of course, you can subscribe and download on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at ugly_werewolf or at ActionJack72. And you can send us DMs. You can let us know which songs, which albums, which bands you want us to do reviews on, and maybe we'll include them upcoming here. I can't overestimate the presence of Led Zeppelin. No pun intended with the album presence. But what Led Zeppelin is in the psyche, in the zeitgeist of rock fans everywhere, especially in the United States of America, Led Zeppelin couldn't be bigger. They had an aura about them. And when I came of age as a teenager in the mid to late 80s, Led Zeppelin were gone and they weren't ever coming back. And so what you had was all you were ever going to have as far as the albums that have been released. Thankfully for us, at the end of high school, they did release the incredible box set. And when we were in college, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got together not only to do the incredible unleaded album and video, but the tour, which we saw them on at the Orlando Arena, which is really life-changing for us both. And we will talk about it here today. So buckle up, Led Zeppelin fans. We're getting into the classic Led Zeppelin IV today here on The Wolf. So before we even get into it, in our lives as rock and roll fans, Jackson, how big is Led Zeppelin? How big is Led Zeppelin in our ethos as rock fans growing up in the 70s and 80s?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I mean, it's got to be number one. It has to be number one because that was the first. To me, it was either Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd was the first band where I was like, wait a minute. What is this? And how have I not heard of this before? Because once you get your hooks into Led Zeppelin, you go through the whole catalog. Like, right. There's nothing that you're like, man, at least for me. I'm like, man, I don't really like that. It's all fantastic. My parents were not into anything like this. So It was when I got to high school and somebody was like, you got to check this out. And just your head just explodes. Like, again, how has this been hiding from me?
Yeah, high school in America, I feel like Led Zeppelin was just part of the soundtrack. If you're in the suburbs, everyone knew Led Zeppelin. Mike Damone talked about putting on, Led Zeppelin 4 in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which was very telling for us back in the day. Classic rock radio, here's the thing. Yes, Led Zeppelin, although I never even became conscious of Led Zeppelin until they were kind of long gone, really. It was in the same time, 8th grade, high school, that you start to discover Led Zeppelin. But it was always on the radio. Suddenly I could recognize it because it was always on classic rock radio. Now that's great that classic rock radio kept it alive and introduced it to a whole new generation, you and me included. However, American classic rock radio has ruined Led Zeppelin for the past generations, these generations after us, Jackson, because they only play like the same 4, 5, or 6 Led Zeppelin songs. They don't go that deep into the catalog. And don't get me started on Led Zeppelin 2, which, like, when you first discover Zeppelin and Zeppelin 2, like, that's a rockin' album, man. There's so many great songs on there. And then thanks to the radio, it's like, oh my God, they're playing Heartbreaker and Live and Love and Made back to back together again. Jesus, man, can you play anything else? Can you play In the Light? Have I ever heard Achilles' Last Stand?
Now, that was part of my problem when this Led Zeppelin record was brought up, because there was a time when I could not listen to it anymore because I had heard it so many times. It was burned into my psyche. But you're right, there's so much stuff that never gets played. And you think to yourself, yeah, why? I mean, it's not like it was really weird. It's not like they did a whole bunch of 28-minute things where it's like, well, you can't play that on the radio. You can play a lot of stuff. You can play Out on the Tiles, which I had never heard for a long time off Zeppelin 3. And where's this been hiding? This is fantastic. Yeah, I don't know why they fixated on a couple of these things and not more breadth of the catalog.
And some of the ones they fixate on Immigrant Song, but I still love it anyway. Cashmere has become bigger, I think. Like, it was always big, but I think like it's moved up from number 7 or 8 up to number like 4. There's obviously some Stairway backlash, but we'll get into that more as we get into the record, because Zeppelin 4 celebrating its 50th anniversary here, November 2021. 50 years of Led Zeppelin 4, Jackson. That's kind of unbelievable. I mean, we're still talking about it now that they've sold 37 million copies or something crazy around the world, and more than 20 million in the U.S. It's unbelievable.
Well, and I was talking to my wife about this, not about this, but about this concept of when this came out in the 70s. So they were born in the 40s?
Right.
The Zeppelin guys. So if you were growing up in the 50s, would you listen to the stuff that your parents listened to? No. What's wrong with you? I'm not listening to the big band or, jazz. No. I want rock and roll. I don't think that they ever thought this would still be around and relevant 50 years after it was made. But I mean, again, I hadn't listened to this record in a while. I went back to it for this show. This is phenomenal.
It's ridiculous.
There's not one song on here. I mean, this might as well be a greatest hits record. There's not one song on here. There's some that are less famous, that are less played on the radio, but there isn't any low spot for me on this record. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and when they did the box set in 1990, which was huge for me, remember when we were talking about on the Eric Clapton Crossroad episodes, I got my dad to go in 50-50 with me on the $60 4-disc Crossroad set. I was living by myself. Well, I was living with a friend, but I was living not with my parents my senior year of high school, and when it came out, I'm like, first day it's out, I'm going to the store, I'm going to get it. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to get it, because although I already had several of the Led Zeppelin records on CD, my first one I ever got, I think, was Led Zeppelin 1. And then I think my second and third was Song Remains the Same, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But I didn't have all of them because I had some on tape and I didn't have all on CD. But then when that came out, I'm like, oh, well, this is like most all of them anyway. And I get something from everything. I get a lot of the good stuff. And yeah, Led Zeppelin 4, every single song from Zeppelin 4 was on there except for 4 Sticks. But 4 Sticks was on Unleaded when Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got back together to do their thing in the 90s. And we got to see them live. They did 4 Sticks on that. So it's an amazing album. We're going to have to go track by track. We kind of have to set the tone, because it's like a lot of people talking this is one of the great hard rock albums ever. And there's some great rockin' tunes on there. But is the Battle of Evermore heavy metal. It's got some heavy themes to it, but it's a mandolin, right? I mean, is that really heavy metal? Is Going to California a heavy metal song? I don't call it a hard rock album, even though they're a hard rocking band. 4 was like the amalgamation of, they took the blues-based rock, their roots from Zeppelin 1. And then they took the hard rock stuff from Zeppelin 2, and then the more acoustic and pastoral stuff and traditional stuff from 3, and they combined them all together to make the 4th record.
Yeah, and I think they do a nice job of the gas and brake on this. I mean, if it's all too heavy, you kind of gets lost. So it's a nice, like when you go from rock and roll to the Battle of Evermore, it's a nice, okay, we're going to slow down here for a minute, give you a chance to breathe, and then we're going to go into, we got more for you, but just relax for right now. Yeah, it is a good kind of marriage of both of those styles, and just giving you something that you can listen to back to all the way through.
Yeah, and it kind of contrasts them to, look, the Beatles are gone now. It's 1971 they're making this. The Beatles have been gone for a while. They're all doing their own things. So there's a little bit of a void. It's like, all right, well, who's going to be the biggest thing in the world? Because the Stones are now about to become exiles and having to move to France. Meanwhile, up-and-comers like themselves, Black Sabbath, well, they're just really super heavy. They're not doing a lot of the mandolin stuff and that Zeppelin's doing, right? The Eagles are just getting started, and they may do some softer stuff, but they're not doing the hard rocket stuff that Led Zeppelin, not yet. And they never really got that hard. So as far as their contemporaries go, they're really kind of blazing a trail. Because Fleetwood Mac's kind of they're bluesy, but now they're starting to break apart, and then before long they're going to have girls in their band. I mean, Zeppelin's really starting to carve their own niche.
It was interesting, too, to kind of do a little more research and find out that basically when this came out, there's some discussion about whether they were at odds with the music critics who thought they weren't very good, and there's something about how Jimmy Page can't produce records. I'm like, I think he can produce some pretty good records.
Whatever.
But it was just they were so big, but yet Zeppelin 3 underperformed in their minds, even though it was a hit, even though it sold records and there are tracks off of that. So they were kind of almost, to your point before, at crossroads. Like, what do we do now? How are we going to make the next record? What's our next move? They took some time off. I know Peter Grant just said, okay, listen, relax for a little while. Let's go to kind of a remote place, really get into this and put something great out.
Yeah, to take them off the road at that point, they were killing it. They were doing it really well live, especially in America. So to take them off the road where they could have been making money and then say, no, we're going to go out to the country. We're just going to get away from it. Not even going to have a pub or, anything right there. We're just going to be chilled out there. And they found a lot of great textures and sounds and had some guests join them. Famously, Sandy Denny and Ian Stewart, who we'll get into a little bit, because I feel like it's the first time they really had guests on there, as talented as they are. They just kind of always did everything themselves.
Right. And the other thing, too, is that you kind of lose the feeling in the more modern way of making records where it's, every 2 years or whatever. The first 3 were pumped out real quick. It's like, blink and you miss it. They've got 3 records, bang, bang, bang. So to have this kind of a rest period was also, I think, pretty good. So they didn't get burned out. I mean, I read somewhere that they had recently in 70 or 71 become voted the top band, taking the Beatles' 8-year run out. So, I mean, they were huge. And it goes back to Peter Grant being the kind of the mastermind behind this whole thing, guiding. I understand Page was in charge of, producing, writing the records, but Grant, definitely had his hand behind them saying, okay, let's point this in the right direction so you guys don't fall off the cliff.
Yeah, and Ahmet Ertegun at Atlantic Records knew what he was doing too. I mean, you cannot be bigger than Led Zeppelin in America. You not selling records right. As huge as the Stones are, and they tour, they make tons of money that way in America. They cannot sell records in America like Led Zeppelin have. It's unbelievable, the sales figures, which means how ubiquitous they are, how many people know the record. And 23 million or something crazy like that in America, that's like 1 in every 13 people, 1 in every 14 people have a copy of Zeppelin 4 in America or something crazy like that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Whereas in England or in the UK, if 1 in 14 people has a copy of Led Zeppelin, that's like 5 million maybe.
Yeah.
Sale. It's unbelievable how popular they are and how they continue to endure, how they influenced all of the 80s. All of hard rock in the 80s is basically filling the void that Zeppelin left, as far as I can tell.
And it was always cool to me that they shut the band down after Bonham died, and we
Great
talked
decision.
a little bit about this on the Into the Outdoor show. But yeah, so there was never any kind of watered down version of the band, and I think that's kind of what led to, you were talking about the Rolling Stones. I mean, when we were in high school, the Stones were still technically around. I know they had that gap, 85 to when they did Steel Wheels. But I mean, that was it for we had the beginning, the middle, and the end. We had everything they were ever going to do. So it was more like you knew you were never going to see them live.
Right.
I mean, we got to see Plant and Page years later. But so it was kind of like this treasure trove of opening this up and saying, oh, this is all great. Let's listen to the whole thing. And then when that box set came out, I was one of the first people too that said, it's a lot of money. It's a 4-discer. I mean, it was probably almost $100 when it came out, in the $80 range or something like that.
It was 60.
But it was all great. Oh, it was 60? Okay.
$59.95
back then. But yeah, I mean, it's all great. It doesn't have everything on it, but it has a lot of stuff on it. And I was looking at it the other day. I was looking through the book that came with it, and that's pretty cool, kind of to go through the history of that. And when it came out, in like 1989 or 90,
mm-hmm.
You didn't have the internet. So it was cool to see all of that information there that you didn't have before, all the photos and the stories from the band. It was a great box set. Didn't replace having all the records. I get that, but bang for the buck, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was. Still one of my favorite purchases of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, it just stirred up a lot of fond memories. And of course, I bought Zeppelin IV. I had it on cassette, and obviously I had the box set, which had almost all of it anyway. When Jimmy started to remaster all that stuff, what was that, more than 10, it was like 7 or 8 years ago, whenever that was, he started doing all of them. And I wasn't going to buy them all, but I decided I would buy a few, either the ones I didn't ever have on CD, or maybe Presents I never had, period, or Coda I don't think I ever had, period. So I went ahead and bought some of those on CD, and Zeppelin 4 was one of them. And these all came with a companion disc that showed like the demos or how things had started, the songs, how they began, and then how you could see how they evolved into the finished product. And a lot of them were really they had the song down for the most part. Some of them didn't have vocals at all. Some of them didn't have, the finished Robert, fine-tuned, on-the-money vocals. It was kind of a guide track sometimes. But still, they weren't that different. So when I listened to it, I could listen to it back to back and really get the feel of it again. And just a lot of it, it's not, I wouldn't know if it's emotion coming back so much as like, I remember this from when I was young. I listened to this 32 years ago or whatever, and it was just as good then as it is now.
Yeah, I felt this exactly the same way. I was thinking about, was it going to lose something after all these years? But yeah, you're right. It's the combination of the songs being fantastic and the memories that you have of listening to them the first time you discovered this. And the other thing that I really like too, you were talking about the stuff that they didn't use, the fact that they had these songs that they would, even if they were mostly done with it, if they didn't feel like it was 100% or didn't fit, they'd hang on to them. They wouldn't put stuff on the records that they didn't think were finished or that fit into it. So that was always kind of a cool thing. Like they were saying, like this could have been probably like 12 or 13 tracks when they got it done, but they said, nah, what we've got is fine. We'll hang on to the rest of the stuff.
And they held on to it for a long time because most of it ended up on Physical Graffiti, which was 4 years after that. It's kind of a long time to wait. Obviously, they had Houses of the Holy in the middle. But the other thing about Zeppelin is, I mean, they came out fast and furious. You're right. Between 68, 69 to 73, they had 5 records. But then after that, there's a slowdown. There's not a whole lot after that, right? Yes, we had to wait 3 years for Physical Graffiti, and that's a double album, and that's great. And plus, we got the live album and movie. The song remains the same. You got to love that stuff. You got to love the movie, right?
Right. Well, that was another thing, too. What do you mean there's a movie? They were in I want that, too. Let's go.
Exactly. But no, Zeppelin 4 just... It just stands the test of time. As a whole, there's nothing bad on it. There's nothing weak on it. There's some that I may not like that much anymore for one reason or another. But as far as for the time when it was released, and then the effect that it had for the next at least 20 years, and now obviously 50 years we're talking about it, but all the people it influenced, all the people who heard and grew up on Led Zeppelin, all the music that was created in its vein, this was the high point for them. Maybe not musically. I think they did some great stuff down the road. This is the high point as far as you make one statement. You get together to make one record. It's hard to top this one.
Well, you figure, too, I was looking at all these tracks. Out of the 8 tracks, there's only 2 on here that aren't hard rock radio staples to this day. And that's something to be said, because a lot of times, like, it's just 1 or 2 that they'll pick. You know, I mean, the album might be great, but they're only 1 or 2 that they put on the radio. Turn on classic rock radio at any time, and there's a pretty good chance one of these songs is coming up pretty soon. They're just in such heavy rotation still to this day.
For sure. So, yeah, all right. So you're at Headley Grange, away from all the hubbub, not in the city where you bump into people and there's parties and there's stuff going on. Get out there and you can really focus. You write these songs. You get the Rolling Stones mobile studio, so you're ready to go at any time. And you got not only the Rolling Stones studio, but the Rolling Stones piano player, Ian Stewart, hanging out to create some cool stuff there, including Boogie with Stu, which would later come out on Physical Graffiti, at least the bones of it. And Sandy Denny, oh man.
This is Neil from Def Leppard, Pod, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast.
All right, we got to get into this. All right, we want to go track by track?
Yes, please.
All right. Wait, first, should we get into the album cover?
We can do that, absolutely.
I mean, that's a big part of it, right? Because Led Zeppelin had this power. They signed this huge deal, and Peter Grant was behind it, that they could have any kind of packaging they wanted, right? And on the third album, right before this one, they had special deluxe ones that had the kind of spinning pinwheel in it that would change the pictures, you know, and the holes in the record thing, and just kind of flexing their muscles there. And like you said, I guess Zeppelin 3 didn't sell quite as well. I think it's held in pretty high regard these days.
Yes.
But at the time, it's like that wasn't Led Zeppelin 2.1, right? I guess is the way you would put it. It's like that's not the exact same thing we just got from you. So, and they took a lot of credit. I mean, look, the critics, Rolling Stone never gave Led Zeppelin a good review. Like we like John Lennon and he's singing about peace, and that's not what you're singing about. Or I don't know what their hang up with. They never liked Led Zeppelin, so they got a bunch of bad reviews. And I think some of it had to do with Robert Plant's too good looking to be like seriously a rock and roll or something like that. I'm like, what? Can you hear the? What's wrong with you people? So,
and I think there was something too, like it's too slick. It's mostly hype. The songs aren't really that good. Yeah, it just seemed like there wasn't really anything positive to be said. It was just they just didn't. I guess maybe they were just too successful right off the bat that people were just maybe jealous. I don't know, but yeah, to pick apart stuff like that is crazy.
Yeah, if the masses like it, I can't like it living in New York City in the Village. I have to like this obscure people who only I know about. All right, so you come in with Black Dog.
But you were talking about the cover.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say, could you imagine how when the Atlantic people figured out what they were going to do, how they must have had a stroke? Are you kidding me? This is what it's going to be. There's no name. There's no album. It doesn't even have an album title. It has nothing. There's no picture of the band. This is going to be a disaster.
I know, that's what, and they, they've got a point, but Jimmy's like, no, screw them, screw the critics, screw everybody, we're going to put this out and let the fans decide. They'll figure it out. People will buy it, people will find it, and then they'll tell each other, and they'll know it's good music or not. And oh my God, in your face, critics, that's so awesome. Like, it's one of the biggest selling records of all time. Like, the Beatles just put out the White Album, just, whiteness on there. There's nothing on that cover, said Bobby Fleckman. And Zeppelin had this torn down wall with a, classical painting amongst the rubble. Became the biggest selling album, rock album, really at that point of all time.
Right. And the kind of the I don't know if this was a purposeful thing other than, just selling it based on the music, but pre-internet, pre all this stuff, you've got, I don't know what this means. It's an old guy with sticks. I don't know what that's all about. The inside had the wizard guy standing on the mountain, the precipice. What's that all about? Mm-hmm. The symbols. What could those mean? People went insane trying to figure out what all this stuff meant. What were you trying to tell me? What does this really mean? And they were talking too about how the symbols became like everybody had their own favorite symbol. Like I love the John Bonham one. I like that. So it was even more like it created this whole extra world for the band that people wanted to live in.
And I remember getting the tape, the cassette, and down the side where it had Led Zeppelin, it had those 4 symbols on it. Like that was the name of the album. Yeah, exactly. It gave it an otherworldly thing, a heavier thing, and gives you your chance to interpret it your own way, which is always smart by bands. Give the people a chance to let their own imagination, what does it mean to them? And then it can mean a million different things, besides just like, hey, I met this girl and we hooked up, whatever.
I remember like there were people like, well, first of all, like back in the day when you had to put the brown paper bag on your book so they wouldn't get all messed up, and then you could draw all over that, and there would be like you'd sit at a desk and somebody had written one of the symbols or all the symbols or something. Like, oh man, that's cool. Whoever did this, they got some skills here with the artwork. That's awesome. But yeah, it could be, it's teachers don't know what this is, adults don't know what this is. It's kind of your own language, and whatever is my favorite. The zo-so. It's not really a zo-so. It means something else. All right. Yeah, you can go on forever.
Yep, that's for sure. But it worked. Jimmy Page, once again. See, I'm a huge Jimmy Page fan. I know you are too. But see, to me, he's this mastermind, man, because he's this incredible guitar player, and he's written all those songs. He's the writer, co-writer on all those songs. He produced all the records too. If he could sing, he might be the biggest star in the whole world.
Yes, I agree with you on that. The other thing that's cool about Jimmy Page is that he really hasn't done a whole lot after that. Like he had a couple records, he did The Firm, he had Outrider, he did some movie stuff, but I mean his main focus is preserving the Led Zeppelin brand, remastering it, make sure that it's the steady hand is on the rudder on this thing. So I always thought that was pretty cool as well, that he didn't abandon it. It seems like some people they kind of just walk away. He never did that. He will keep this as a treasure forever.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the box set was like a diamond box set, and it's like 4 records or something like that. And then he does the DVD. Yeah. The DVD was like a diamond DVD that came out in the early 2000s. I mean, there's plenty to maintain. There's plenty of money to make off of Led Zeppelin. Just get us some new stuff now and then. I'm pretty hopeful for a new Zeppelin concert movie. I feel like there's been one was unearthed and not like a Queen Freddie Mercury movie, biography kind of thing.
Yeah, like an
old concert
where actors
movie.
Played.
Yeah, I don't need that.
Want to see that.
I want to see the concert movie. I want to see stuff that's kind of tucked away here and there to really see them at their peak of their powers. That they have some good stuff, but like there's Earl's Court, there's Knebworth, there's a couple of others. They obviously did some TV stuff, but not a ton because they didn't have to because they sold so many damn records. After this thing came out, they could do whatever they wanted. For the most part, they kind of did.
Yeah, and it was just the fact of they had put together and this is the Peter Grant deal, those deals that they made so much money that they could do whatever they wanted to. And so, I mean, unfortunately, they kind of backed off with the production of the records. And I know I was reading something about how this took so long that people were like, the band broke up, obviously, that there can be no other explanation as to why this record is taking so long. So the second that you're not in the public eye, stuff like that just starts to trickle down. Oh, obviously you're done.
Yeah. Oh, so long. Was it 8 months? I mean, it wasn't. It really wasn't that long considering bands go years and years without making records anymore. Yeah, crazy. But I mean, okay, so it took so long. Well, you can see what they were up to with the quality of this record, up and down, top to bottom, every song and every player on the song. I'm listening to Bonham on all these things. It's like, God, he was so good. It's unbelievable how good John Bonham was, how big he was. Not just tight, but how he hit those things, man. It produced a lot of sound and power.
I was going to say, a couple of these things, I would imagine that perhaps he sat down in the morning, just looked at the drum kit and said, sorry, fellas, but it's going to be a rough day today. He beat those things into the ground. And that's always, they had a big deal on Howard Stern a couple of months ago about, who's the greatest drummer in rock and roll history. Is it Bonham or is it Neil from Rush? And, of course, everybody had their own deal. To me, it's not even the same thing. Neil is a Ferrari and John Bonham is a giant 2-ton troop transport thing. It's just brutal. Just brutal on the drum. But the thing was too, he could play a lot of the time changes that he did and the shuffle stuff that he put in. There's a lot more going on there, but just the brutality of what he did to those drums is almost a cry.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. Obviously, John Paul Jones resumes his role as Led Zeppelin utility infielder, and underappreciated is not the right word. Underheralded, maybe. Not unheralded, but underheralded talent. He plays a lot of different stuff on this one. I do think the bass is a little low in the mix on some of these songs.
Okay.
I mean, especially the ones where Jimmy's got 2 or 3 guitars overdubbed. I'm like, JPJ's there and he's killing it, but he's not in my ear the way he should be.
Well, the problem with him is that in this band, there's 4 guys, and you're competing with Plant and Page and Bonham for screen time here. Yeah, it's tough. So, yeah, I think he is like you said, maybe not underappreciated, because I think everybody knows what he can do and what he's done, and just underheralded. But he just kind of seems like that kind of dude. Like, he's just not very flashy.
Understated, yeah. Been married to the same woman all these years, more than 50 years. He's just a kind of rock solid guy, but just talented as hell. And, not as crazy, maybe, as the other 3 guys. Nothing wrong with being a little quiet when the other 3 are those 3.
If you're going to try and compete with that, you're going to lose every time.
That's for sure.
I think there was a thing, and I don't know if I've told the story before, and for the audience out there, if I have, I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell it again. There was a clip of him playing "Are You Gonna Go My Way" with Lenny Kravitz from like the MTV or something like that. From what I read, he was there. They decided to do this. He had never played the song before. He just went on there and just did his thing. And it was super tight because he's just a fantastic musician just in his own right. He was a big session guy, as was Page, before they started this. But yeah, just a guy that can really just play anything.
And he wrote half the songs, or co-wrote half the songs on the album with the other guys. But he plays organ, piano, or electric piano, bass, little guitar, maybe it's a mandolin, does the recorders on Stairway. So, yeah, I mean, a man of many talents and just tight as he could be. Please check out this word from our sponsors.
Oh, wait, we don't have any sponsors.
All right, so you start this thing off with a little number called Black Dog, named because a black lab ran into the studio one day when they were working on this, and like, all right, we'll call it Black Dog. Starts with a little, it sounds like a little guitar thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is. There's a little myth around what it is or is not. But then you got Robert Plant doing the Hey Hey Mama, which at the time, it's like, wow, that's powerful. It's cliched now, right? It's like, oh, that's Led Zeppelin, but I'm telling you, at the time, that is groundbreaking. And then he's got that heavy-duty guitar riff. And it's not always precise through the whole thing. Not sloppy. It's just sometimes he starts a little different time. But that's cool blues, dirty rock and roll. And, I mean, it's a classic, I guess.
Well, yeah, one of the most easily recognizable guitar riffs probably in Page's arsenal. And it's cool, too, because especially if it comes on the radio, you kind of get that second and a half of, hey, okay, well, I can turn it up now. I know this is what it's going to be. They don't jump right into it. Dirty, really cool, heavy, but also bluesy. The other thing is Black Dog. What are you talking about? There's no black. They didn't talk about a black dog. There's no mention of it. They could have called it anything. They could have called it Sunday Afternoon. And that was one of the cool things about Led Zeppelin was, again, when you got wait, I don't get this. What is this? What do they mean? What could the bigger meaning behind Black Dog be about? That's what they liked, and that's what they called it.
So, full confession, this is my least favorite song on the record.
Right? Is it your least favorite because you don't like the song, or is it the least favorite because you heard it 700,000 times?
It's the latter. Yeah, it's
okay.
It's the one they overplay it on the radio. It's not that it's bad. It's not that I don't like it. It's that I've heard it and I get it. And it's one day I was at the Jimmy John's picking up some sandwiches, And there's this loudmouth kid who was like sweeping up, and he's the one talking to everybody while they were actually working. But he's like, look at me, I'm so smart. And he's the guy sweeping up. And, he's talking about how Led Zeppelin, that's why Led Zeppelin sucks and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're an idiot kid. They don't let you work the register. They don't let you handle the food. They don't let you talk to customers. You're just supposed to sweep up. But I don't blame him. It's not his fault, because between the public education system and classic rock radio, it's making kids kind of dumb to Led Zeppelin because they play just a few songs and they certainly get old. You think, oh, well, they only had those 5 or 6 songs. And this is just kind of one of them to me. And look, it's unique. Hey, Mama, that is definitely Led Zeppelin. It's a seminal song. And then, of course, Robert Plant sampled it on himself later on. I'm still not a big fan of sampling. Didn't think he should certainly be doing it. And so, if I listen to the record, I can skip this song. I can skip song 1 and start at the second song.
I think this is the track that, even if somebody if you said Led Zeppelin and they just kind of looked at you like, I don't know what you're talking about, like I've never heard of them before. I can't imagine there is a person like that. But I mean, I don't know, maybe my mom. But you played that. Oh yeah, I've heard that song before. This is the one that, it's on all the time. And so that's what I was really trying to do, listening to this record again, especially that track. Can I kind of push that bias off and listen to it? But you're right. It is burned into my cerebral cortex. I don't even have to listen to it. I can hear the whole song in my head.
I know. And this, you could almost say the same thing for the second song, Rock and Roll. Mm-hmm. But to me, that kind of bonzo opening, hitting it, oh man, that's so good. And then that's a killer riff. And it's got a little swagger and swing to it. You can just see Jimmy Page in his black dragon suit just strutting around the stage, playing his Les Paul, doing that. I'm like, that, I don't know, something about it, like, yes, I've heard it a million times. Yes, it's a classic. But it makes you want to kind of get up and hop around. And at over 250 pounds, I don't hop that much anymore.
I think it was like Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp or something. Stuart Copeland was doing something about teaching people how to play drums. I don't know. The guy was playing rock and roll, and he just looked at me. He's like, you're not going to make it. You are not going to make it through this song. You're too tight. It's a long song. There's a lot of drumming right now. You need to relax or you're going to burn this. You're going to burn out. So my point on that was the fact that Bonham could play with that much power and still make it through a whole set, to me, is a testament to this one. And it's anybody who ever played the drums, that's what you want to play. You want to get up there. You start it off. You're not dropping in at a certain point in time. That is driving the bus on this track. And it's almost like you jump onto a moving train on this song.
It's fun. I think it's a fun song. And, Jimmy's solo in the middle, he gets up there nice and high.
Yeah.
It's killer. It's a classic Zeppelin track. And the thing is, there's probably people out there who are the reverse, right? They love Black Dog. They can't stand rock and roll. To me, it's Black Dog. I've heard it enough. Rock and roll, I can take it. Bring it. I love it. Good stuff.
Alrighty.
And I love rock and roll.
It's been a long, lonely time. Yeah, I don't think I could ever get sick of that. I mean, they do play it a lot, but yeah, it is a great track. Then they just totally jam the brakes on with the Battle of Evermore.
Yeah, but it's intense. Yes, it's softer. It's a little slower, but it's intense, and it does build through it there. Not quite to the degree that Gallows Pole did on the previous album, but you're using the mandolin, which sounds amazing. And again, are there contemporaries of the day, Black Sabbath, playing a song with a mandolin on them? I don't think so. Other people might be using it, but then they'd be proggy, like maybe a Yes or an Emerson, Lake and Palmer or something, not quite so heavy as this. And you hear the J.R.R. Tolkien lyrics in it. And you hear Sandy Denny, who has a beautiful voice and was very well thought of in her day as an extraordinary British songstress, songwriter, and performer. And she didn't make it out of the 70s. God love her. Alcohol kind of got her. But this is Led Zeppelin working with other people. And Sandy Denny really delivered, having that other texture of a woman's voice, playing with Roberts throughout the song, special.
And for a long time, I thought it wasn't another person. I thought it was Plant, either they're messing with his track or him singing up higher. The two voices sound very similar. They go together real well on this track. I mean, I didn't have the liner notes or anything, but like I said, I thought it was, they just either he delivered it differently or they sped the track up or something to make his voice sound higher instead of having another person there.
In the first 3 albums, I guess they probably would have done something like that, but then they decided it's okay to bring a couple of people in, and that was Sandy Denny, the late Sandy Denny. Also, of course, Ian Stewart on Rock and Roll, when you can hear him banging on that piano, just sitting on that thing there at the end while Robert's singing and Jimmy's doing his thing. I never knew that was Ian Stewart. That's so cool. They not only got the Rolling Stones mobile unit, but they got a former member and their piano player, Ian Stewart, to play on there. And it really does give it a texture because it's got that kind of Memphis thing going on. Ding, 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 ding. Just holding on to that during that song. I thought it was great. And while it's amazing that they can play so many different instruments and it's pretty well a contained unit, it's nice to hear them go out and just get a couple of people on a couple of songs to give it extra texture, and it makes it special in the catalog.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of cool too where could those guys play the piano? Probably. I mean, I would imagine that they, if you're that accomplished a musician, you can probably play the piano, either Page or Jones, but to have now we need the man in here. Let's get if that's the sound you're looking for, why not just get the guy who that's his signature sound to do it?
Well, they were jamming.
At this point in time,
right? They were jamming, and it came together. It's like, all right, we're going to make something out of that.
Yeah, and then later to get the Boogie with Stu from these sessions is pretty cool, also.
Absolutely. I think he died in 1986. So it was Sandy Denny like 77 or so. John Bonham died in 80, and Stewart died in 86. Otherwise, the boys are still kicking. But I love that song. It's kind of got a medieval, madrigal, otherworldly quality to it. It kind of fits some of the lyrics. It seems like Robert really excels with these kinds of lyrics, the Tolkien-esque Middle-earth kind of knights and shining armor time. That kind of seems to be his forte with the lyrics.
And it is a nice change of pace coming off the first 2 tracks to kind of, like you said, it's heavy, but it's not as fast. You kind of get have to listen to the whole thing. And it is cool to listen to the lyrics. I was talking to a friend of mine, his wife, and I can't even remember what song it was, but she's like, yeah, I never really listened to the lyrics. What? How can you not? What are you doing then? You're just it's just kind of floating around your head. You don't really get into it. So if you don't listen to the lyrics, I'm sorry, because you're missing a lot of it in these songs.
I'm with you there. So like we say, Page and Plant wrote every song, and they wrote 4 together. And this is Battle of Evermore is a Page Plant one, as is Stairway, as is 4 Sticks and Going to California. Black Dog was Jimmy Page, Robert, and JPJ together. Rock and Roll, the 4 of them get credit. And see, that makes me happy because John Bonham's signature drum should count as part of the writing of that song and the drive of the song, right?
Right. That's always the question is, how do you get credit for writing the song? Well, you have to come up with the initial idea and, a lot of times if you're the bass or the drummer, you just kind of fill yours in. No, that was the signature piece. So you're right. That is cool that they gave him writing credit on it because, to me, that's kind of the main riff of the song. Is the drum beat. Yeah,
and he gets it again on When the Levee Breaks, as again he should, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But so it's Page Plant Battle of Evermore, and then on to the epic, The Stairway to Heaven. So, all right, give me your impressions of Stairway to Heaven. What does it mean to you, good, bad, indifferent, Stairway to Heaven?
There's a lot of Black Dog in there for me because it's been played so many times. People have butchered it, I think, in the past with different renditions of it. I had to, again, put all of that aside when I was listening to it again. It's a phenomenal song. The way that it starts off, the acoustic part at the beginning, I think everybody at some point in time has tried to play that because it's the signature piece.
Absolutely.
The way that it builds, the way that it gets to be this epic, and then that friggin' solo, which legend has it was a one-take deal. Knowing the rest of what I know about Jimmy Page, I don't doubt that. It's a phenomenal song. It's 8 minutes long. Apparently, the record company was really pressuring them to put out a single version. He said, absolutely not.
What would you cut? That's crazy.
That was his thing. And if you want it, you got to buy the whole record. I'm not putting this out as a single. Yeah, I think that it would have been an awful radio edit. So good kudos to him for saying, no, it's the whole thing or nothing. Yeah, this you were talking about the top of the top. This is probably their signature song as far as here's what we can do to put this epic thing together.
Yeah, it's certainly a high watermark. And to have JPJ do those recorders at the beginning, which I think they were kind of maybe thinking about a piano or electric piano, something like that. I think the recorders are perfect. I think Robert Plant really came up with a lot of the great lyrics, like he was up to the task. And I think I saw a thing with Jimmy talking about how when you're a studio musician, there's one rule: don't speed up. Don't speed up in the middle of the song. Keep it the same tempo throughout. But he's like, I wanted to create something where it did build. And so it's very spare at the beginning. And yes, as a guitar player, as a teenager that was one thing I had to want to play. Never really made it.
At least try.
Yeah, exactly. You can play at the beginning. It's not that hard. Getting to the solo was beyond where I ever got. But absolutely, you got to try to play at the beginning. And so it's very spare there with recorders. And then now he's strumming a little bit. Now we're onto a 12-string, making a little more noise. And Robert can pull his voice up a little bit. And then bringing Bonham in the middle, right? Bop, 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 and then... Yeah. So then, all right, so now you've got a build going, and now we've got, we're walking with a little faster pace. And then he called it a fanfare, with the D's, sus, 2 and 4, da-na-na, da-na-na, da-na-na. He's like, I want to change it, because this solo is going to heat up. This is going to be electric. Check this out. Like, he's saying this in his 70s, like he's still impressed with himself,
Yeah, it's just, to hear that solo is just, that's got to be up there with top stuff that was ever recorded coming out of a guitar. If you ever wanted to, what's so great about Jimmy, just listen to that. I'll just put that on. I'll just put the solo on, the intro up to the solo, ba-ba-boom, ba-ba-boom, and then go and just hammers it. And then there was the whole thing about the Kennedy Center honors, about how Hart was going to do Stairway to Heaven. Yeah. And apparently, I don't know what the deal was, but they were not really thinking about Jason. I don't know. They didn't know he was going to play that. And to see the look on their face with him sitting behind the drum kit with the 3 circles on the bass drum, he had the bowler hat on. They were crying. The 3 of them were in tears when they saw him back there. I was like, I'm not crying. You're crying along with these guys. I mean, it's phenomenal to just see the power that it still had, even for the guys who wrote and recorded.
No, absolutely. Pagey was digging it. That would have been a great honor to play Stairway to Heaven to Led Zeppelin at their Kennedy Center honor.
And that's what Ann Wilson was saying. She was like, I think this may have been a bad idea because this is not an easy song. Yeah. I mean, either you're gonna knock it out of the park or you are gonna fall way flat on this.
There's a lot of music in it, no doubt. And he did Jimmy did the Arms concert and then tour, which was a benefit for Ronnie Lane and for MS. And kind of one of the highlights of the show was that Clapton, Beck, and Page were all on it. So then eventually they could kind of do a little Tulsa time with Eric Clapton singing lead, and they could switch off leads and play their little bits together, which was something everybody always wanted to see since they'd all been in the Yardbirds. But when Jimmy had his personal time on stage, he would play Stairway to Heaven with no vocals and with a band and I think, keyboard player. And I had a video, and I've talked about this on the show before, that I got from Blockbuster, a VHS cassette that they, I guess, had rented, and now it was in the bin like, let's sell this and get rid of it. I didn't know this even existed. Paul Rodgers, Jimmy Page, Charlie Watts, Bill Wyman, there's all these great Eric Clapton, Steve Winwood, amazing people on here. So I'm like, why not buy this used cassette, VHS cassette? And his performance of it, the solo on it, to me, is the best. Because obviously something like that that's so long and big and momentous, it evolves. And Zeppelin could stretch songs out. They play Dazed and Confused for half an hour sometimes, it's crazy. So 8 minutes now, they can make that 10 or 12 minutes if they really want to. And his version on that Arms VHS, no singing, no Robert, it's not the band, but just the way he plays it. And some of it's a little sloppy, that's Jimmy, but it's phenomenal. You got to check that out.
Will do, absolutely.
So that's side 1. And yes, I know it's side 1. I know where it ends because I had the cassette back in the day. It was one of the first cassettes I got, or was it one of the last cassettes I got before I started buying CDs? That might be the case.
The only thing was, it was still, at that point in time, it was still more economical / convenient to have the tapes because even though you had a CD player, the car CD player was just a whole other. That
was far away.
A whole other realm to get into.
Now, here's the thing. To me, Stairway doesn't fall into that Black Dog category because I know it's like the most requested thing, crazy thing like that. that, but I don't think it's overplayed because I don't think they play it that much. I don't think they play it as much as they play Heartbreaker, Live and Love and Made back to back. I swear. And then when you hear it, it's like, this is great. It's not like, oh God, I'm sick of this. It's not like you're in the guitar shop where there's signs up like no Stairway, no Smoke on the Water. This is classic rock, and there's a lot of classic rock out there. And they play different Zeppelin tunes. I think Cashmere has become more prevalent on classic rock over the last 30 years. And Stairway to Heaven, less so. I don't think it's overplayed. I don't. Given how good it is, I think there's other songs that are overplayed. I can't even listen to Led Zeppelin 2 anymore. I don't. It's the only one I don't own on CD or have never owned on CD.
Interesting.
I can't listen to it because they just overplay it on the radio. And to me, Stairway, it's like I hear it, I'm like, because there's so much crap on the radio anyway. It's like I hear that, I'm like, oh, thank God. And it's long, too, because, it's not like I'm getting 30 seconds of it and then we're on to something else. Even if you come in the middle, it's still a full song.
Well, and then that goes back, too, to the thing with you don't have to wonder when it comes on, is this going to be the full version or is this going to be the single radio edit?
Right, like they did with Reaper back in the day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. You're in for 8 minutes and 2 seconds when it comes on.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go to side 2 here.
Alrighty.
Misty Mountain Hop.
So Yes, that's another one too, where it kind of starts. He's got a little bit of the intro, boom, 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 and then Bonham just comes in. It's just again. Yeah. Sorry, fellas, but you're gonna get the snot beat out of you today on this one because it's got a fantastic drum beat.
And Jimmy's guitar, the riff, where he's sliding down there, doing that thing. That's cool. I mean, that's a slick guitar move right there. It's great. And of course, the Misty Mountain is another Tolkien reference there. But this is a upbeat groove. It's got a groove to it between JPJ and Bonham. They've got a groove to it, and I think it enabled Jimmy to throw that slide in. You slide down the neck like that to make a classic song.
And it's interesting too because I'm trying to remember if I don't know what you call this vocal delivery, but when you're singing along to the beat, that he doesn't really do it all that much. Plant doesn't, so it's an interesting change of pace on this one. I know we've talked about in the past Ozzy Osbourne does this a lot, but
because he has
Plant not so much. yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a nice change of pace, and then he does break out of it, for the choruses. But just to hear him do that at the beginning is kind of cool.
No, I think this is one of the ones, to me, the bass is a little muddy on this one. I can't hear it all that well.
Okay.
When you get through the solo, he does the solo, and then he's, which is kind of like a third overdub. So he's got like the basic guitar, he's got the end of his solo, and then he's got that little flavor in there. And to me, it's like JPJ is just drowned out.
Yeah, and it's too bad because I'm sure that there was something good in there somewhere. But yeah, the more overdubs that you put, that's what's going to happen usually, is it just gets pushed farther and farther down and out.
And as long as Jimmy Page is producing, he's going to put himself on top.
Correct.
And that's okay.
I think would be
good.
Yeah. No, it'd be great. More guitars. I second that.
But then Four Sticks, look, this is the one, we always say there's always one you forget about. Well, I can't forget about any of these songs. I've listened to all of them way too many times. And so there's nothing on here like, I forgot that was on there. No. But Four Sticks is the one song that you don't hear on the radio like at all, hardly. Right. It was the one song left off the 1990 box set. And although they played it, Page and Plant played it when they toured together and reworked it a little bit. It's heavy, and it has kind of a cool bridge, too. It's almost proggy in some parts, to me, it sounds like. Obviously, I didn't forget this one, but it's like, this fits in so well on the album, and yet it's heavy, very heavy with the riff, but then it's also got this kind of otherworldly progginess to it, man. It's the one that nobody picks, and it's good.
And it's kind of cool, too, because it's now, what is this, 6? So it's the second song, 6 total, second song on the side B, or side 2. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, you forget about it, and then it comes on with that drum beat, you're like, oh, hey, it's like an extra treat on there, because you forget about it. Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, there really is no low spot on this. There isn't really anything that I would say, I never liked this song. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is a very cool extra on there. I don't know why they left it off of the box set other than time.
Space, right?
But no, it is great, and it's one that you kind of forget about a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously we know it's on there, but it's so good. It was great to be able to revisit that one. You can hear them hitting something I mean, in the background, like there's another drummer, like there are drumsticks going, because you got Bonham doing his thing. Sounds like there's a little something going on there.
I think they call it because that's what he used. I think he used 4 sticks on this. He I don't know whether he had like 2 in each hand or something, but it's extra drums all the time.
And it's great. It's a Page Plant, right? As is Going to California. Kind of a sweet song. And the bridge, it gets a little out there, but it's a classic. Everyone knows Going to California, man. I mean, you can't go wrong with this one.
You really can't. And I think, didn't Mike Damone say side 1 of Zeppelin 4?
Right, because you got to get the Stairway to Heaven.
You got to get the Stairway to Heaven, but Going to California was a big hit with the ladies, too. Anytime you could put, I don't like Led Zeppelin, you put that, wait a minute, yeah, my wife loves this song, maybe one of her favorites. It's a love song to California, just kind of that West Coast dream of, especially if you grow up in England where it's gray and rainy and
land of the ice and snow.
Right, yes. To have this place where the sun always shines and just, the beach. And for me, too, being in Connecticut, growing up, where it's like, California's the place to be. It's just, weather's always great. Beach is there. Oh, man, I want to go to California.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not them pleading for approval from California so much as, that's a great spot. I've been there. And
exactly. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to pack up and go. I'm out. All
right. And then you wrap up with, to me, another epic and maybe the best song on the album, When the Levee Breaks. It's a different song.
Cool.
It's different. It's okay. All 4 of them get writing credits, but they also have to give it up to Memphis Minnie and Kansas Joe McCoy, who kind of had this original idea for it. Jimmy kind of changed the guitar up a little bit. It's based off their lyrics, and the lyrics are incredible, fantastic bluesy lyrics. Crying won't help you. Praying won't do you no good. That is heavy duty, man. That's so good. And the drums, man. The drums, you will never hear another drum sound like that ever. That is the best capture of John Bonham's talent.
And here is the genius of Jimmy Page. I don't know why you thought to do this, but it was maybe just you had something in your head and you weren't getting it. The whole deal about how they put them at the base of the stairs and they hung the microphones. I guess they suspended them somewhere in just to get that reverb. Yeah, that it's just. I mean, he can hit them hard, but I want it. I want harder. I want more brutality. I want just. It's almost like you can feel the rain coming down if it keeps on. I mean, this isn't letting up anytime soon. It's just an assault, and it's slow. And the lyrics are fantastic, and the harmonica is fantastic, and it's a great way to end the record. And even though it's 7 minutes and 7 seconds long, it doesn't. When it ends, you're like, oh, that's it. I want more of this.
Exactly. Apparently, they slowed that down. Like everybody but Robert is a little slowed down there, which is interesting as far as they recorded it and they kind of just pulled it back to give it kind of that heavy thing. Kind of make it a little more Sabbathy. And Sabbath would just tune down and play slower. Zeppelin played the thing and said, all right, let's mix it a little differently here. But then give Robert the chance to sing it in real time there. And I don't know, I even feel like some of the slide guitar could be backward masked towards some of the end of it.
It could be. I mean, at this point in time, where he was messing with the studio stuff, it could very well be.
But I mean, everybody shows up big time on this song. It's an amazing way to end an album because it's kind of moody. You say it's heavy, but it's also kind of chill. I don't know. It's moody. It's kind of almost proggy, although with Jimmy's guitar, it gets a little bit heavier. I don't know, man. I mean, this whole album is not that. I mean, 4 of the songs I wouldn't call heavy hard rock songs. That's half the record. This is got its own feel to it. I don't know. It's an amazing track.
Well, and especially if you're listening to it, if you're listening to the whole record, you come off of Going to California, you're like, oh, that was nice. And then it's like someone hits you with a baseball bat on the beginning of it. You're like, what is that? Now we're changing gears again. Yes, exactly.
Oh, man. So cool.
And then the other thing I love too is when Jason Bonham talking about how he didn't want to be like his father. Mm-hmm. He wanted to be like, I don't know, he named a couple of other people, hard rock drummers. And no, I don't want to be like my guy on pop. I want to be like these other people. And he ended up getting to meet all those guys. And they're like, we just wanted to be John Bonham. Exactly. Like, don't get it twisted up. Everybody after he came along, he set the bar so high for rock drummers, probably like him and Keith Moon, the guys who made the drumming center stage. They made it its own thing. Not just, oh yeah, there is a drum part. No, that is the part on this.
That's right. So we never got to see Led Zeppelin, obviously, Jackson. In 1980, they broke up after the death of John Bonham. But people like you and me and a lot of people, millions of people across America and around the world, continue to listen to them, stay true to them, get the big box set. And then Jimmy Page and Robert Plant decided to do the unleaded thing, rework a few of these things, break some back out, and then they went and toured. They actually toured a couple times. I saw them on both their tours, but they toured and came to the Orlando Arena March 7, 1995. I believe we were there.
We were definitely there. I remember when we were in line for, I think it was the Rush tickets, and we were camping out, and there was this older guy there, and he was the guy that had, we had 6-pack of Schlitz and 2 beef jerkies, and this guy had like his hammock and everything set up. He was a pro.
Right.
We were talking to him, and I remember him telling a story about going to see Led Zeppelin. Man, if only that'll never happen. And then to hear them, announce the project that they were going to get back together and get to go see them was awesome. I would have never bet that in a million years. Remember, we were sitting there. The house lights were on, and then the house lights went down. Mm-hmm. And as soon as the house lights went down, in my life, I've never smelled so much weed at one point in time.
Oh,
it
my
was
God.
like on cue.
It was unbelievable. It was like the 2 old lesbians next to us lit up a joint, and like the 2 kids who basically made out the whole time in front of us lit up a joint, and then like the two crusty old dudes on the other side of us lit up a joint. It's like the house lights went down, and then it was unbelievable. Like, Jesus Christ. And we didn't bring any in. I'm like, no, let's smoke it in the car, because we bring it in, we're going to get busted. Like, that's the dumbest thing. Jesus Christ. We got high anyway, It was unbelievable.
Well, what I was thinking about was...
And they played 4 Sticks, by the way. They played 4 Sticks, which was... that and Black Dog, which was the second to last song, only 2 they played off of Zeppelin IV when we saw them.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal show. It was actually kind of cool because they played something off of Plant's record at the time.
Right.
Whatever the thing was. And then they played Pride and Joy off Coverdale Page, too, which was, I didn't think he'd do in a million years.
I never thought he would play a David Coverdale song, especially after all the shade he threw them. No, it was Shake My Tree. They played Shake My Tree.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was very surprised about that. The Robert Plant song, not so much, because, it was his solo album. But the fact that it was David Coverdale, I didn't think that was going to happen. But I love that song, too. Yeah, man, it was great. They did Gallows Pole. They did No Quarter. They did In the Evening, which I didn't think they would ever going to do anything from In Through the Outdoor. But, hey, look, so happy I got to see them. And they did that with the Orlando Philharmonic, or, whatever it was. In every town, they would basically pick up, if they had an orchestra, and play songs with them, and of course they ended with Cashmere. It's a big way to end the show. But the second, and they had a bunch of people on stage. It was basically a lot of the people from the Unleaded video, basically the same band. And their drummer, I remember, was killer. He looked and played like Mitch Mitchell. But the next tour, when they did Walking in Clarksdale, was basically like the 4-man Led Zeppelin band. And I saw them with Rob and a couple of chicks in Jacksonville. And they did change up the set list, obviously, because they're playing some different songs. And they did stuff like Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You and How Many More Times. And then they also had some new songs at that point that they could play, like Walking into Clarksdale and that kind of stuff. So they didn't have to just do the old classics, but, mix in some ones they didn't hit on the last tour. So to me, that's okay. The fact that we never got to see Led Zeppelin, but I got to see those 2 tours. They did do that one big one at the O2 Celebration Day where, no, we weren't lucky enough to be there, but we got the DVD. The fact that they never did another tour, I'm okay with. They're preserving their legacy. They're not fucking it up. They did a couple of special things, and I'm good with where Led Zeppelin is. I hope they never really play ever again. Yeah, I think at this point in time, probably not. I think it was Jason Bonham saying that he's gotten offers, they've gotten offers for, like $1 million each a show or something like that. Yeah, there's no interest. I think that both Plant and Page have enough other stuff going on in their lives that they're not really interested in doing it. And they got to do the two albums, the 2 tours, get the whole next generation of people something. And I think they're good, just kind of riding off into the sunset now.
I think so. And God bless them for it. Their albums are amazing. To sell more albums, I think the Eagles sold, Hotel California and Greatest Hits sold more. I think AC/DC's Back in Black sold more. And Michael Jackson's Thriller sold more. And that's it. Like, those are the 4 records that sold more in America than Led Zeppelin 4. Unbelievable achievement, and endures to this day. And I'm glad that they both kind of get to go on and do their own thing. Jimmy's the the curator of Led Zeppelin. Robert Plant's made more records than he ever did with Led Zeppelin as a solo artist, worked with a lot of different people. He's about to release another one with Alison Krauss here. So, good for him for not being beholden to it, and good for Jimmy keeping the flame lit.
Yeah, good, because I think the remasters that he's done, I think were not just cash grabs. Like, they were really, he cleaned them up. I'm sure he's a guy that probably, if he could probably do it all again, just because he's got that perfectionist mindset that it's never really done. But I like the fact, too, that stuff that Robert Plant's done on his solo tours or solo efforts, he's kind of moved into some different areas, and he's just not doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's not, Plant sings Led Zeppelin or whatever. Right. He's got his own stuff. I mean, I would have never thought the Alison Krauss thing would have worked. It's pretty good.
It's fantastic. I saw him do it live, too.
I've not heard that.
I saw him do it live. She did one of her big live albums at the Louisville Palace. So they did a couple of nights at the Palace, and then when even without her, she did a couple of nights at the Palace. Robert just plays Louisville. I guess it's because it's got some bluegrass roots to it. And that's, kind of the way he's liked to go here these last few years. But look, man, I saw a thing. It was a live thing. They were playing in Mobile, Robert Plant, maybe with the Shapeshifters. I'm not sure exactly. Or the Band of Joy. I'm not sure which one it was. But he's doing an interview or whatever. The guy's interviewing, and then they kind of get him candidly. This girl walks up to him. She's probably late 20s, early 30s. Blonde. It's like, I wanted to come over and meet you. You are so hot. You are da-da-da. And he's in his 60s, and he just stands there and smiles at her. And just like, this never gets old. Why does he keep doing it? Because this shit happens to him. This beautiful woman walks up to him and says, you are so hot, even though you're more than twice my age. And he just sits there and smiles like, yeah, this is a good gig.
And you figure too, like, what else is he really going to do? I mean, if he still has passion to make music and to go out and tour, God bless him. I'd rather see that than nothing and have him just go nuts sitting in his house.
And I support him all the way. I'll buy his new record, and it helps me with She Wolf because she loves country music. So it's something else I get to play. We can listen to together.
Perfect.
So, all good. Well, folks, that is our take on Led Zeppelin's fourth album, Led Zeppelin IV, Led Zeppelin, the classic runes, whatever you want to call it. It's one of the most amazing and best-selling albums of all time, especially in the United States of America. And when you grew up in America in the 80s, the way Jackson and I did, it was required reading. It was practically something they handed you in the suburbs once you hit 13 or 14 years old. You couldn't escape it. You better like it because you're going to hear it a lot, and we certainly have over the years. Being able to revisit it now, it hasn't lost any of its luster. It's still phenomenal. And the fact that we got to see Jimmy Page and Robert Plant tour together in the 90s was a real dream come true, something that Jackson mentioned he never even thought would happen. And no, they didn't play that many songs from Led Zeppelin IV on that tour, but they did play a couple, and the Unleaded special was very big for us as well. Finally having something new, although they were really just reworking a lot of songs, having something new from Led Zeppelin, or from the main two guys in Led Zeppelin after all that time, was special. And they played Battle of Evermore. This time Najma Akhtar was singing Sandy Denny's role, but not singing the lyrics, singing the giving it some real texture and making it a special kind of rework of that song. I hope that not too many young Led Zeppelin would-be fans have been turned off by classic rock and the 5 or 6 songs that they seem to focus on all the time. Heartbreaker, Livin', Lovin' Made, Whole Lotta Love, Black Dog, Immigrant Song, maybe Cashmere to an extent. It just seems like they play the same ones over and over. It doesn't even dive into all the rich textural songs that they have over time. And they're talked about as a hard rock band, and there's some hard rocking songs in this record, but about half of them are not. They're moody, or they're acoustic, or they're pastoral, not exactly Black Sabbath throughout this record. You're not going to mistake them for the Sabs on this one. It'll always hold a special place in our heart. I can't believe it turns 50 November of this year, just a little while after we release this episode. And if you haven't got it by now, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but you've been missing out. Now, if you like this episode, you should go back and listen to episode number 10 on In Through the Outdoor, which we think is an underappreciated, undervalued record in the Led Zeppelin catalog. And of course, we want you to go check out all past episodes at www.uglyamericanwerewolf.libsyn.com. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at ugly_werewolf and at actionjack72. But as usual, folks, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? Hey, let us know. Shoot us some DMs on Twitter at ugly_werewolf. And let us know which albums you want to hear us review. We're working up to our 50th show, and so we're doing some 50th anniversary albums. Next week, we're going to feature the all-time soul classic Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, which also turned 50 earlier this year. And it's really poignant in that it was discussing a lot of things like race relations, people getting beaten and shot in the street, civil rights violations, stuff that we were against back then and are still against, and yet the same cycle continues to happen. A real triumph for Marvin Gaye and Motown, and we're going to review that one next week. So until then, rock and rollers, for all of you great rock fans out there all over the world, we appreciate you listening. We hope you tune in and subscribe. And until next time, be cool and stay safe.